All right, so we're here with the executive vice president and I guess the general manager of the Baltimore Orioles, Mr. Mike Elias. Mike, thank you for taking the time. How are we feeling today?
Yeah, good to be here, Ryan. We got a game in a couple hours. Made a pit stop here on the third floor of this glamorous studio, and excited to sit down with you.
Yeah, I know they've done a lot of renovating in this building over the last 30 some years, but hey, you know what? It does the trick. You know, people know the obvious title for you. Oh, you're calling the shots in Baltimore. You've helped construct this, but I want to know more about, or at least for the audience, who is Mike Elias? Give a little bit of the backstory for you about kind of your journey into baseball, even getting here to Baltimore.
Boy, yeah, pretty simple. I played baseball growing up in Northern Virginia, and I was a good high school pitcher, and I ended up getting recruited by like smaller Division I schools. Most of them were kind of academically oriented because I was a good student, and I ended up going to Yale and playing baseball there. And I was basically like a mediocre to bad small college pitcher. And I really liked baseball, obviously. And when you're a starting pitcher, you get to watch a lot. I would just, sit there basically 4 days a week and not be in a game and just sit next to our coach or whoever. Our coach was a guy named John Stuper that pitched in the major leagues for the Cardinals, won a game in the 1982 World Series. And right around that time, I hurt my shoulder. The conference that I played in has weird rules about grad students not being eligible to play. So most kids in the Ivy conference, when they get injured, they'll either take a full year off of academics and take like a leave of absence so that they can play as a fifth year senior, or you transfer to another school as a fifth year if you want to play an extra year. So I did the first thing while I was rehabbing my shoulder, and it was right when the book Moneyball came out, and at that time wanted to become a scout. I just thought that would be a good path for me, and I was really interested in watching guys and breaking them down. And even when I was playing as an amateur, like kind of seeing where they end up going in the draft and things like that. My coach, through his experience, put me in touch with a guy named Dan Kantrovitz, who was the assistant scouting director for the Cardinals. He's now the VP of scouting for the Cubs and has had a great scouting career. And Dan hired me basically right out of school, and they kind of trained me on the job to be a scout. And that was under Jeff Luno, who was the Cardinals VP of scouting and player development at the time. So I worked with those guys. Sig Mejdal was working there at that time, and had a really nice indoctrination into baseball and a really good scouting department in St. Louis. A lot of old school guys, but there was a lot of new school stuff going on in the office. How do we combine those things? And spent a few years driving around in a car and watching as many baseball games as possible, and signing players and stuff like that. And got promoted within the Cardinals, was effectively like the assistant scouting director under Luno for a year and a half. And he got the Astros GM job in very end of 2011, and brought Sig and me with him as his first hires. And then just kind of took over different departments throughout my time in Houston. Came here at the end of 2018.
Yeah, the reason I bring that up is just because when people look at the journeys of how to get there, and people always think, oh, you have to have a professional background of playing, but if you have the knowledge and you have the insight and you have the chance and the desire to be in pro ball, and it's a different world, as you've seen, it's a different world from the playing side to trying to be on the business side. So I just love to get the context for everyone out there, because a lot of people want to be involved in the game, but they don't know how to. But this is the part, then you got to see the business side of baseball. And as we know, and being a player, and technically, I guess you were my boss back in the day when I was with the Orioles organization, but you have to have that business side, that mentality of making decisions. And it's not trying to be personal, but it is just what you're trying to do for the better of the team. Do you have a memory where you were put in a position where you have to start to give the bad news? You have to be the bad guy, because that's just a part of it. Do you remember something when you were coming up with, whether it was with the Cardinals or Houston, where it kind of sit in like, hey, this is how it works?
Yeah, at least for me, it happens really gradually. You just get little doses of it, and it increases. It depends on your path, but I was a scout, and you're really mostly delivering good news when you're scout, because like you draft somebody, you get a lot of experience dealing directly with agents because you're
Yeah.
calling them. And so that's a really good way to get to know everybody. And then, you draft a guy, there's a negotiation. And it used to be a little trickier than it is now with the slotting system. Back then, you really had to negotiate, and there was some suspense about whether the guy was going to sign. But mostly you're signing players and you're not the one like releasing them or firing people or things like this.
Yeah.
But as you move up and you start running departments, you just get exposed to that more and more. And it's very difficult, and it's something that doesn't ever go away in terms of difficulty. But you do, like anything, you kind of build muscles for it over time with practice. But it's tough, baseball, the whole nature of it. There's a set number of spots,
Yeah.
and there's always people competing for them, and it's just a constant churn to the top for all these great baseball players around the world. All want to be up here, and there's only so many spots for it. And it's kind of our job to manage that.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, like, I think if everyone had a choice, be like, yep, I want everyone to be in the big leagues, right? I tell people this all the time when I've had to give honest observations, not my opinion, but just going, well, look, everyone wants to be in the bigs, obviously, and then everyone wants to be able to tell you or tell the player you're in the big leagues, you are our guy. But you're right, there is a limited amount of spots, and right now in Baltimore with the prospects and the team and everything that you have, there are limited spots. Obviously, I mean this pool of talent is ridiculous. But also, I try to remind people, and this is maybe one of my pet peeves, so to speak, is that the prospects are so talented, but you also have a roster of guys that are veterans that have had so much success. And now you're no longer the team from 2021. And I was in the organization, some rough years, there was some rough times, but the team in general, how do you value in some cases the prospects? Yes, the upside's there. But with some of these veteran guys, it's hard to find guys that are proven in the big leagues because the prospects, it's like a lottery. Is this fair to say? It's almost like a lottery ticket. You feel like you got a lot. If you have a lot of good players, you're thinking maybe 1, 2, 3 of these guys are going to be the all-stars you're hoping, but you don't know. But you do know you have talented guys like Anthony Santander came over and all of a sudden from the Rule 5, and he's been the top offensive producer the last 2 seasons in Baltimore. Cedric Mullins obviously said he's one of my former teammates. But how do you look at that from a guy that also, at least, to explain to the listeners about it, of your value in the veteran guys, but understanding the prospect situation?
Yeah, there's a lot there. I would say, as evaluators, like if you're a scout or whatever, an analyst, and you're asked to give a forecast of what this guy's going to be, and we do that, and there's a sort of trajectory that we think the player's on. But if you look at baseball history, and if you keep track of your predictions and you keep track, there's just a lot of variability for players, and it's more unpredictable than we appreciate in real time.
Yeah.
And the future is very surprising sometimes. And so it's our job, I think if we're doing it well, it's a blend between, hey, we like this guy, we feel really good about him, we think he can grow into X as a player, but we've got to sort of stay nimble and see what happens, because there's players that are going to surprise you. There's just things that are going to change. And so I think probably the best way I could describe what we try to do in the front office is get a sense of kind of what we think the trajectory everybody's on, but be humble and kind of give ourselves latitude if we see those things altering, and keep an eye on everything else. And we there's days where we only need 9 players, everyone's healthy, but then we got a long season ahead of us. And while at times it can feel crowded to have a lot of really good position players on the roster, like right now, I think this roster's got 13 guys that could be starting somewhere in the big leagues on a nightly basis.
No doubt.
And so right now with everyone healthy and it being April with the off days and all that, it's a bit of a juggling act for Brandon to keep everybody sharp in the lineup. But we just know how baseball is. We all have time left. We're going to need every one of these guys at some point in time. So it's a difficult balance at times.
We're talking about a marathon of a season, right? Marathon of a season. And I think that's where people look at it. They're like, yeah, I want this guy to be up here. But the other part of it is you're trying to let your young players develop. And you just brought up that case. You have 13 guys that could be playing elsewhere, but only 9 can be on this roster. So you have some of these young, talented players. where they're not playing every day. You're still on the development side for these guys, with certain guys that are highly viewed throughout the baseball world as being top prospects. If we're saying it's the Kobe Mayos or Heston Kjerstads, they're saying, oh, they're doing great. And they are. But you're right. They're still at an age too where the value of them playing every day is still so valuable as compared to some other guys where they've been around longer and they kind of understand what their role is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think there are young players, guys in our system, whether they're 100% ready for the big leagues or not, different conversation. But even if
Right.
they were, if they're not going to be able to play when they're up here, you don't necessarily want a player that young that you view as a long-term, everyday guy to spend 3 months sitting on the bench and never playing. There's limits to the benefits of that experience. So, that can often be part of the calculus. Whereas if it's a guy in his 30s, been around the block a little while, has settled into a role, we embrace that on the bench. And oftentimes those guys, coming off the bench is hard. You have to know how to prepare. You have to anticipate situations. You have to keep your body loose without wearing yourself out unnecessarily. And so they're often better at actually doing the role too.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and again, if you want someone to come off the bench and be in AAA and hit a $167 like I did, let me know, Mike. I'll come on back. Come on back to Norfolk if guys are coming up. But one of the guys just came up, obviously Jackson Holliday. The talent's there. You see it, and it's a cool moment. I get giddy about. I don't care about the results right now. I care about that he's living out a dream. Getting to talk to Matt Holliday about it. It's fun and it's an exciting time for everybody. But I think also everyone, because of everything nowadays in social media, everyone's expecting these prospects to hit the ground running constantly. We've seen Gunnar had his struggles. Adley had his struggles. I remember even too, Cedric came down to Double-A with me in 2019, but it doesn't mean that these guys can't be successful players. Can you just again elaborate on with the Jackson Holliday of just, hey, there's a lot more that goes into it, and players, this is arguably the most, I shouldn't say the most players of his caliber, if they ever struggle for the first time, it's getting at the big leagues to the top level. And I think that speaks volumes, but there's a grace period.
So first of all, I think with him, it's great where he's at right now, and everyone should enjoy. I think it's rare if you're a baseball fan to watch a 20-year-old with the type of potential career that he has sort of go through this phase, because this isn't something you get to see. It's once every 25 years or so where we get to kind of watch a young player that has the pedigree that he does, like in this phase of his career at this young of an age. But the jump from AAA to the big leagues, a couple things about it. Number one, we're going through a pitching crisis right now. We have so many major league pitchers hurt. I'm guessing there's probably not a lot of major league caliber pitchers in AAA. Usually there's not, but if this might be fewer than ever, just because everyone's looking for pitching right now. So that's a big jump in that regard. But then also, if you're in A ball and you move up to high A, you're only going to face guys that are so good, because if they're too good for high A, they go up to Double-A pretty quickly. But when you go from AAA to the majors, there's nowhere else for them to go. So you're facing guys that are multiple levels better than you, but there's nowhere else for them to be promoted to. So it's the biggest jump in baseball for that reason. And on top of it, like I said, I suspect everyone's got a lot of their pitching up in the big leagues right now because of the scarcity of pitchers that we have. So it's an enormous jump. All you got to do is look at, like you mentioned, our past number one prospects and guys like Cowser and Grayson, even as a pitcher. It's normal for guys to start slow.
Well, also too, I think about it when you're the guy in the minors, you're the guy, and you're going to be hitting in the middle of the lineup, or you're going to be the top guy, and you can get away with more even the pitching side because, like you just said, there's talent down there, but everything's magnified in the big leagues, and no longer is it about just development. It's about, yes, we want you to develop, but we need to win games, and I think that's what sometimes people forget. And again, I remember the same thing. My dad had his struggles his first year, and then he got to the big leagues. Calvin was hitting $117. Would you have gotten rid of him in May by then? Is that a good time to get rid of him? I would have probably gotten rid of him. It's funny people bring that up to me, specifically him, because I thought I had it figured out. He had 3 hits on opening day. I think he went 2 for his next 55. And so I want to give context to people there. I think it turned out okay. Safe to say, Baltimore still likes.
Yeah, and so some of it's necessary, honestly. I mean,
Yeah.
you're a phenom like that. It's very possible you haven't encountered any type of failure, extended failure,
Yeah.
in the batter's box up until that point.
Yeah.
And learning how to get through that is a fresh experience sometimes for these guys. So, it's probably something he looks back on as a positive.
Oh yeah, he does.
Yeah.
No, I mean, well, in the moment, there's some
Yeah.
stories. Well, we can save for the off-air stuff, but that was tough. That's the frustrating part. But again, I just want to give context because I think behind the scenes there's so much when you talk to everybody. It's all about what's happening right now. What do you expect as a timeline? And there's way more to that in the sport of baseball. This isn't. There's a reason why you go to the minor leagues for years. And in this case, for Jackson, he just shot up there so quickly, and he was rightfully so. And he looks the part of it. Now it's just about him getting comfortable. A couple fun things now. How about this before we get close to wrapping up? Been in Baltimore now 6 years now.
This is year 6. I think
Year
it's been,
6.
what are we, April 24? I was November of 18. So
yeah.
Never 5.5.
5.5.
Yeah.
Hey, well, happy almost 6
Thanks.
years for you, Mike. Here we are, and you're still here, and things are great. Actually, the first thing I want to do, did you ever have, I know you're confident in what you do. You guys are very specific, but do you ever have any doubt that anything at one point, I'm like, could something go wrong? And the only reason I'm asking this is more of like a life thing. Did you ever, or were you confident, hey, I know that this is going to work out here in Baltimore and we're going to see these great days ahead?
Yeah. I first of all, I think a big part of our operating model is we have a lot of doubts about what we're doing, and we bake it into our operating model. So when we talk about players, when we talk about moves, when we talk to one another, we're very like probabilistic about it. And so there's like a humility from being in baseball for a long time. If you're really keeping score on things, you realize how hard it is. And so we try to have a science of how we go about our decision making that is cognizant of the failure rate in baseball for players and for scouts and executives. It's tough.
Yeah.
I really felt the benefit of coming off of the Astros rebuild. First of all, having gone through a really arduous rebuild and kind of having the scars that come from that gives you a lot of confidence. But also, we had really spearheaded a lot of, there's kind of a big technological revolution in baseball the last 10 years, a lot of new technology available. How do you use it? How do you implement it? What's the right amount of use? And we had kind of gone through that on the front lines of it in Houston already. So sort of coming here, knowing what the right balance was, I think really helped give us a lot of confidence. But at the time we took over, we had nothing but problems in the organization. And, we didn't have international, we didn't have an analytics department. You're looking up at the AL East. I didn't know whether
it's not getting any easier in the AL East.
We just kind of did as well as we could, and we'll see where it takes us. And it turned out that we were able to win the division in 5 years, in spite of all the weird stuff that happened in 2020 and 2021. So, were we confident we were going to win the division? And no, but we were very confident in the process and the methods, and we had a lot of good fortune too.
Yeah, actually, on a side note, I'll talk to you off the air about it, but I still thought the fact that you took Gunnar Henderson to the alternate site in 2020, I believe, I thought was one of the best moves I can ever think of, just like bringing Jackson, because when you expose players to higher levels that you have confidence in and let them develop, that would be for a whole other conversation. That got me all giddy about it because it worked out well. And for them, they rose to the occasion. And I know that they appreciated both of those opportunities. So, but one thing, you're very analytical and you're very documented. But at the same point, though, you've made moves in the past that, and the reason why I bring this up, because I talk to the guys, they're still my teammates. They're my friends first, former teammates second. But you understand chemistry on a team, and you understand of the dynamics of a locker room. And the guy that I constantly heard the last 2 years that this team raved about were not these two high-powered players. Do you have an idea of the two that I'm going to reference here? No, you're curious now?
I'm looking forward to hearing, yeah.
Kyle Gibson and James McCann.
Oh, yeah.
And when I went down to spring training this year, I said, hey, and the guys I work with Zach and Brad, and we were talking about it when I went down to spring training. You'll guess the name I heard. And they're thinking, wait a minute, it's got to be a high prospect. No, it's the veteran guy. They said James McCann this year because he means so much to us in so many different ways, that whether he helps them with understanding themselves as young pitchers, helping the hitters, and bringing a kind of bond to the team. You can't quantify that data, but that obviously has a huge value to the team. And obviously you guys realize that.
We been very fortunate. Both those guys in particular, Adam Frazier last year too.
Frazier
It
too.
was a real winning oriented veteran group. They were really kind of teaching the young guys winning baseball and winning habits, and that's gold when you can get it. And you do your best to suss out their reputations before you bring in veteran free agents, or I guess in McCann's case it was a trade, but.
Yeah.
You don't really know until they get in the door. We've been real fortunate with the outcomes on that front. We do put a little legwork into it, but like I said, there's a lot of luck involved too. And those guys have been terrific. And then even in the rebuilding years, Brandon and I, when we think back on the veterans that we had, like they helped bring this group along. Like you start, with Iglesias and Freddie Galvis and Chirinos and Jordan Lyles, and just so many positive contributions from that group. And it was kind of incremental. And, kind of looking back on some of the X factors for why we got out of the doldrums, like you got to credit those guys a lot. So yeah, when you see it up close, you can't quantify it, but if anyone's seen it up close, you can't talk them out of it that there's something to it. Right.
Yeah.
So we do the best we can, but it's not a science.
Well, that's the other part of baseball. That's just what I love with it. There's just things that you can't quantify. And everyone that's saying about, hey, you can have all the talent in the world, but we saw last year, the Padres, you can buy a lot of money. Doesn't mean the team's going to have the success. You got to have the right formula, guys stay healthy, and things come together. And then you say it's luck. I think it's more, they say once is luck, twice is skill. And you've been doing this for, I don't know. I feel like we've been saying the skill part now. It's like move after move after move. You're hitting the right buttons. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it, by the way. I think you're doing great so far.
I mean, look, I think, anytime you're talking about like a batting average on something, there's a lot of luck involved. So we're real mindful of that, but you try to put yourself in a good position to, have things fall your way over time.
Yeah. I mean, hey, just baseball, you fail. And that's the part that I always hated. Fail 70% of the time, you're still one of the best. For you guys, if you can get most of them right, it's going to help you for success. All right. A couple fun things. Then last final thought. Okay. Important questions. This is the real important questions. Favorite condiment on a hot dog? You're at a ballpark. What are we going with?
Mustard, like a what do you call it? Kind of old fashioned mustard, not the yellow kind, like the browner,
like Dijon?
Yeah, like that. And then relish.
So you combo the both.
I've been known to do that. Yeah. So I hope I'm not discriminating against the hot dog race that we do every night, but those are what I prefer to eat.
Yeah. Well, people don't, I'll admit here, and people can roast me for this. Growing up, Mike, I was a plain hot dog eater. It was bad. And my mom actually plain. Okay. Yeah.
Well, at least you're
that's a little bit of judgment right there.
No, you don't run into that every day, but at least you're appreciating the main course.
Okay. I don't know how I feel about that response and look and answer there, Mike, but I'll live with it. Okay. All right. Fair enough. You got two on there. This is probably a fun moment. The obvious answer for you to stay in the last 6 years was winning the AL East and celebrating and the celebration of the clubhouse. I tell people popping bottles and being a part of it, that's got to be one of the most, for me, that was why I wanted to play. I mean, yeah, making a career out of it. Yes. But those are the moments you live for you being with the Orioles. Do you have a favorite memory that people might not know? Maybe it's important to some other people, but specifically to you.
So I'm not great off the top of my head, so I can't vouch for this being my very favorite memory.
Okay, one of them.
But this popped into my mind halfway because of you talking about the playoffs and popping bottles, but also you just bringing up McCann, Frazier, and Gibson. And the story is, this is one of my favorite memories, or at least it pops in my mind. We had the game against the Rays, where it was a potential clinch game. And we had not, I think we were probably like 2.5 back or something at the time. I don't remember, but we were going for the division, 1.5 back. I think it might've been pretty close.
Yeah.
And we weren't in a position to clinch division, but we were in a position to clinch like the third wild card or whatever, but we hadn't made the playoffs yet. So it's kind of a big deal of coming out of a rebuild. So we had a meeting in Brandon's office before the game. Like, what are we going to do to celebrate? Are we going to do anything? Are we going to do nothing?
Yeah.
Are we going to do something in between? We had a big meeting about it with McCann and Kyle Gibson. And we sort of landed on, because McCann had been with the Mets the year before. And they were going for their division. They won. They clinched a wild card. They skipped the celebration because that wasn't their real goal.
Right.
And then they ended up sort of collapsing the rest of the way, and they never celebrated.
Yeah.
He was like, that kind of stunk. I don't know if we want to do nothing, but you definitely don't want to act like you're spiking the football when you're haven't won the division yet, or at least that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Brandon was kind of saying the same thing. So we didn't really know what to do. We landed on if we won the game, we were just going to do kind of a subdued little toast and not a blowout celebration. And so that was how the meeting was wrapping up. Adam Frazier is walking by, wanders into Brandon's office, and he's like, "What's the plan?" And we told him, and I'll clean up the language a little bit, but
you don't have to, but
you
can do whatever you want.
He was like, "Forget that. We're celebrating if we clinch the playoffs." Anyway, I was like, okay, this guy seems like he knows what he's talking about, but we'll see what happens. As it turned out, he has an incredible historic base hit, the double down the line. It ended up being a wild walk off, with Mullins walking it off, and it was just and so it was a blowout celebration in there, and it was just really organic. And obviously, it was a huge moment for all of us that had done the whole rebuild and been a part of it. But damn it, Adam Frazier was right about that, and he deserves credit. And it was probably one of my favorite times here so far in 5.5 years, but we're hoping for more of that.
Yeah, see, like that's this type of stuff that you live for. And for a fan base too, like this is, I think what excites me hearing that. One, wish I could have that experience, but hearing people talk about it, I mean, it means a lot. Like even you expressing that, I wish you could have used the explicit language. I have an idea of what Adam Frazier might have told you there, and people can read between the lines, but that's the beauty of it, right? And that's the goal for the Baltimore Orioles moving forward. So to close out with this, because this is something that I asked David and my father about. We're keep hearing next chapter of Baltimore baseball, right? And I'm not expecting you to have the answers on what it means for business on the baseball field, because that's something that we can't control, or sorry, what we can't control right now. But for you, what do you envision as the next chapter here for the Baltimore Orioles for this 2024 and beyond?
I think it's pretty simple. We've got a really clear shot, and like we're doing it right now. Like we are. This is a first-class organization that's doing everything right. We're going to do everything right. It's been the case here before that the Orioles have been seen that way, and increasingly so here again. And we've got a vibrant new local ownership group that's going to bring all that energy. We're going to renovate the entirety of Camden Yards over the next several years with this bill that's been passed by the state, and that David and his whole group will be tackling. I think it's an incredible opportunity and frontier for the team, but also for the city and what everyone wants to see here in the Inner Harbor. It's all going to kind of pivot off what's going on here at Camden Yards. And then, we've got arguably the largest concentration of talent in this organization that it's had since the 1960s or so.
Yeah.
And it's all in front of us. So, the sky's the limit, I think, where we can take this franchise in the next 30 years. And, a lot of that work has been done over the last 5 years, but I think the most important parts of it are coming up as we pull in the renovation and more of the rejuvenation of the attendance and the business operation and everything that Camden Yards can be.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I love is that this being here, people Baltimore love the Orioles. The community loves everything that's happening, and seeing the team where it is now. And personally, I always have a personal connection to it. Set aside that there's someone that I know that's a part of the new ownership, but specifically being that it's the guys I played with, and then knowing how much the people in this community care about it. That's what matters more to me. With all the renovations, though, we'll just keep this room the same as is, though, Mike, right?
This is the studio you want. We can keep it 1992 in here for you.
I think we can.
Yeah.
We can bring you back on and be like, hey, we're back to it. Everything's been changed except this room when we had our first interview. But hey, Mike, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And whether you like it or not, I'll be sure to bother you in the future.
Yeah, with a lot of fun. We'll do it again. Thank you.